Ever find yourself utterly captivated by, like, a simple, perfect bite of food? The kind that makes you stop and think, wow, how did they do that?
Oh, definitely.
Or maybe you've been scrolling through skincare advice online, feeling like you need, I don't know, a chemistry degree just to figure it all out.
It can feel that way, yeah.
Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Diza. We wade through tons of information to pull out the really interesting bits.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're jumping right into a whole mix of recent insights, all pulled together for the Consumers 360 podcast over at consumers.app.
Lots to cover today.
Totally. Get ready. We're going to explore everything from the secrets behind amazing food to the latest in skincare, sustainability, and even some surprising money stuff.
Sounds good. And thinking about that, how did they do that food moment?
Yeah.
A really good starting point seems to be this Japanese concept, Shokunin.
Shokunin, right. I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's more than just being good at something. It's this like deep, unwavering commitment to your craft, a total dedication to getting every little detail perfect.
And you can really see that in Tokyo's food scene, can't you? It's incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, Tokyo has more Michelin-starred restaurants than anywhere else in the world.
More than Paris, even.
Yep, Paris is second, but Tokyo is number one, which really makes you wonder, what's their secret sauce, you know?
Exactly. So what is it that Michelin looks for? Is it just fancy ingredients?
Well, it's a few things. They look at the quality of the ingredients, for sure, but also mastery of flavor, cooking techniques, the chef's personality coming through in the food,
Okay.
value for money, and really importantly, consistency. You have to deliver every time.
Right. Consistency makes sense.
And you can see how that Shokunin spirit, that relentless pursuit of mastery, gives Tokyo chefs a real edge in all those areas. It's baked into the culture.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Something else we all deal with. Sweeteners.
Ah, yes. The sweet stuff. Or maybe not so sweet stuff.
Right. There's some interesting research looking into the potential health impacts of all these synthetic ingredients popping up everywhere in our food.
It's a real balancing act, isn't it? On one side, researchers are raising flags about synthetic ingredients possibly being linked to, metabolic problems. But on the other side, we're seeing more and more of these non-nutritive sweeteners, the artificial ones, and even some natural ones being used instead of sugar, trying to fight obesity and things like that.
So we're trying to solve one problem, but maybe creating another.
Well, that's the emerging concern. Questions are coming up about the long-term safety of some synthetic sweeteners, how they might mess with our taste perception or even have their own metabolic effects down the line. It's complicated.
Definitely a puzzle.
And it gets even more tangled when you throw social media into the mix, how we see food online.
Oh, yeah. That's huge. Yeah. What's the research saying there?
Well, it seems like even though healthier, maybe local food options get some attention, especially in places where obesity isn't as high, it's often the really sugary, less healthy stuff that gets the big social media buzz. More likes, more shares.
So what's trendy online isn't necessarily what's good for us. Shocker.
Pretty much. It highlights this potential gap between, online food trends and actual healthy eating. Makes you wonder how much our feeds are really shaping what we put on our plates.
Yeah, definitely food for thought there.
Maybe.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk skincare. Lots of interest there.
Always. And the digital world is massively influencing it now, isn't it?
Seems like it. Things like digital dermatology, TikTok.
Exactly. Influencers, like Hiram Yarbrough, they've become major voices. They're really shaping what people buy, what routines they follow. It's a totally different way of getting advice than it used to be.
But it's not just about the latest cult product, right? There's an environmental side, too.
Yes, definitely. Concerns are being raised about the environmental impact of some synthetic skincare ingredients, particularly things used for, skin lightening or depigmenting.
Oh.
Well, a study from 2025 apparently flagged their ecotoxicity, basically, how harmful they can be to fish and other aquatic life when they wash down the drain. So there's a push for more biodegradable options.
Okay, so sustainability is becoming a bigger factor in beauty, too.
It seems so. And even with all the cool digital dermatology tools, there are still challenges. The AI needs really diverse data to work well for everyone.
Right. Otherwise, it might not be accurate for different skin types or tones.
Exactly. So researchers are working on building better, more efficient and accessible AI models for that.
And it's actually changing how we interact with dermatologists.
Yeah, there was a study in Tunisia showing how these digital tools are changing the whole patient journey, from how people first check their skin to the treatment choices they make.
Interesting. And are natural ingredients genuinely better for the skin, or is that just marketing?
Well, from an environmental angle, natural ingredients generally have a lower impact. They tend to break down more easily. So there's a solid scientific reason to lean towards natural, at least for environmental reasons.
And is the industry catching on? Are they trying to find safer stuff?
It seems like it. There's mention of the cosmetics industry investing in finding safer alternatives and even pushing for stricter rules around synthetic ingredients. So progress, maybe.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, so from skincare ingredients to cosmetic procedures, let's talk Botox.
Right. Often used as a catch-all term, but there's actually more to it.
Yeah, I saw that. There are different types.
Yep. You've got Botox itself, but also Xeomin, Dysport, Jeuveau, and a newer one called Daxxify. They have slightly different formulations. They might spread a bit differently once injected, and the effects can last for different amounts of time.
Okay, so not all the same.
Yeah.
And can your body react badly to it?
It's possible. There can be immune-related reactions. Your body might form antibodies against it, which could make it less effective over time, or you could have a hypersensitivity reaction.
And does that tie into broader worries about synthetic stuff in cosmetics?
It does touch on that, yeah. There's scientific discussion about potential risks with synthetic ingredients generally, including Botox. There was even a case study mentioned about reactions showing up much later. Makes you think about long-term exposure.
And what about the whole halal cosmetics thing? Is Botox halal?
Not inherently, no. But the interest in halal cosmetics is growing, reflecting demand for products aligning with specific ethical or religious standards. They're developing ways to assess ingredients, which might open up more options eventually.
How safe is it, generally speaking, from like a regulator's point of view?
Regulatory bodies like the FDA generally consider it safe for cosmetic use when it's done correctly by someone trained, but they keep monitoring it, obviously.
And the risk of actual botulism poisoning, is that a real concern with cosmetic use?
Very, very low. The doses used cosmetically are tiny, purified, and really controlled compared to what causes botulism.
Okay, that's reassuring.
But patient education is key. Making sure people understand the procedure, the risks, the different types. That's crucial for safety and getting good results.
Makes sense. All right, let's pivot again. Back to diet. But this time, looking at longevity. Living longer.
The quest for a longer life. Plant-based diets seem to be a recurring theme here.
Yeah, there's a big study out of the University of Sydney. They looked at data from over 100 countries.
Wow.
And found a link between eating more plant-based protein and living longer.
That fits with a lot of other research, especially around those blue zones, places where people live unusually long, healthy lives.
Right. The blue zones, what's the connection there?
Well, it might have to do with plant-based compounds called polyphenols. They seem to influence aging processes and help protect against age-related diseases. Plants are powerful.
But going fully vegetarian or vegan isn't always straightforward, is it?
No, there can be challenges, like making sure you get enough vitamin B12, which is much easier to get from animal sources. You need to be mindful of that.
And technology is even getting involved in figuring this stuff out.
Kind of, yeah. There's this concept of digital beings, basically super smart computer models. They can simulate how our gut bacteria interact with our diet and how that might affect longevity. It's pretty futuristic.
Wow. Like a virtual gut.
Sort of. But there's also a very real-world issue, affordability. Access to a consistently nutrient-rich diet is still a major hurdle for a lot of people globally.
That's a crucial point. And the environmental angle. How do plant-based diets stack up there?
Generally much better. Producing plant-based foods usually takes fewer resources, less land, less water, and generates fewer greenhouse gas emissions compared to raising livestock. So it's often a win for the planet, too.
So summing it up, eating more plants seems linked to lower risk of chronic diseases, better weight management, and potentially a longer life.
That seems to be the takeaway, yes. Lots of potential benefits.
Okay, let's dive into the world of finance for a moment. Something about the Reserve Bank of India.
That's right. They've made some tweaks to what's called the Liquidity Coverage Ratio, or LCR.
Okay, LCR. What is that in simple terms?
It's basically a rule forcing banks to hold enough easily accessible cash or assets they can sell quickly to cover their potential needs in the short term. Like if lots of people wanted to withdraw money, it's a safety buffer.
Got it. And what did the RBI change?
They lowered the buffer required for certain digital deposits, but they increased the rate they assume people will withdraw stable retail deposits made through things like online or mobile banking.
So how does that affect regular banks or even us?
Well, the LCR itself is designed to keep banks stable, which is good for everyone. These specific changes, they might indirectly influence inflation, maybe, by affecting how much banks have available to lend out.
Ah, okay. So if banks need to hold less for digital deposits, maybe they lend more.
That's one potential benefit for them, yeah. It could free up some resources.
And why increase the expected withdrawal rate for digital deposits? People taking money out faster online.
That seems to be the thinking. It probably reflects the reality that people can move digital money much quickly these days compared to, going into a branch. So they want the buffer to reflect that potential speed.
Makes sense. And these LCR rules, they weren't always around.
No, they were a big part of the global Basel III regulations that came about after the 2008 financial crisis. The goal was to make the whole banking system more robust.
So India's move is kind of in line with what's happening globally.
Seems that way. Trying to balance keeping banks safe and liquid with allowing them to support economic growth. It's a constant balancing act for central banks.
Okay, finance covered. Let's swing back to health and wellness.
Yeah.
Fad diets. Oh boy.
Always a popular topic, aren't they? And often not the best approach.
Right. They usually make these wild claims with no real science behind them, and they're super restrictive. Like, who can actually stick to eating only grapefruit forever?
Exactly. And that restrictiveness is a big problem. Cutting out whole food groups can lead to you missing out on essential nutrients, which isn't great for your health long term.
So what does work, according to the research?
No surprises here, really. Sustainable weight loss comes down to balanced nutrition, eating a variety of healthy foods, and making gradual lifestyle changes you can actually live with. Exercise, sleep, stress management, the whole picture.
It's not as sexy as a quick fix, but it works.
Precisely. Interestingly, there's even research looking at specific proteins, like one called LKB1, and how it helps manage nutrient levels in the body. It connects to things like fatty liver disease. It just shows how complex our metabolism is.
And what about weight loss medications? They mentioned?
Yeah, things like semaglutide are discussed. There was a big trial, the Step 1 trial, that showed it could lead to sustained weight loss for many people when used appropriately.
But back to the fad diets. Are there actual dangers beyond just not working?
Yes. They can promote really unhealthy relationships with food, create cycles of restriction and binging, and sometimes they're just scams designed to take your money.
So the bottom line is, balanced nutrition, sustainable habits, beat fad diets every time for long-term health.
That's the consistent message from health experts, yes.
Okay, what about our furry friends? Pet health is important too.
Absolutely. And pet obesity is a surprisingly big issue, much like it is for humans.
What are the main risks if a pet is overweight?
A lot of similar problems, actually. Metabolic issues, hormonal changes. It increases their risk for a whole range of diseases.
And does it affect how long they live?
Sadly, yes. Excess weight can shorten their lifespan and definitely impacts their quality of life. Makes them more prone to things like arthritis, joint problems, and diabetes.
So what can pet owners do? It's mostly on us, right?
It really is. Managing their diet, not overfeeding, choosing appropriate food, and making sure they get enough exercise are the crucial things owners control.
Are there specific diseases linked to pet obesity in recent studies?
Yeah, studies keep confirming the links to chronic conditions like diabetes, certain cancers, heart problems. It's serious stuff.
What are the best ways to prevent it then?
Consistency is key. Regular feeding schedules, measuring food portions instead of just filling the bowl, and building in regular activity or playtime every day.
It sounds remarkably similar to managing human weight.
The parallels are strong, yes, both in terms of the health consequences and the basic management strategies. Diet and exercise are fundamental.
And vets emphasize getting on top of it early.
Definitely. Early intervention, regular weight checks at the vet. Catching weight gain early makes it much easier to manage before it leads to bigger health problems down the road.
Good advice for all pet parents. Okay, next up, portion sizes. How much food are we actually eating?
Right, and how does it vary? It seems culture plays a big role. Different cuisines have different norms for portion sizes.
Like how? Any examples?
Well, the article mentioned Korean and Japanese cuisines, for instance, often having a higher proportion of carbohydrates in a typical meal compared to, say, protein or fat.
And what about takeout? Those portions often seem huge.
They often are. especially with things like Italian or Vietnamese takeout. Part of the reason might be that carb-heavy ingredients like pasta or rice are relatively cheap and very filling, so it feels like good value.
But maybe not always the most balanced. Which diets are considered well-balanced?
The Mediterranean diet often gets highlighted. Lots of plant-based foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, healthy fats like olive oil, and moderate amounts of fish and poultry.
And eating super high-carb meals all the time? What are the potential downsides?
Regularly doing that can increase the risk of metabolic issues like insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, especially if the carbs are refined rather than whole grain.
Does when you eat matter too?
Potentially, yes. There was even a study mentioned looking at how meal timing and how often people ate could affect nutrient intake, specifically during pregnancy.
So any practical tips for managing those giant takeout portions?
Simple things, really, like consciously deciding to split a meal with someone or putting half away for lunch the next day before you even start eating, just being mindful of the quantity.
And can general nutrition guidelines help figure out good portions for different types of food?
Yeah, things like the plate method, aiming for half your plate veggies, a quarter protein, a quarter carbs can be adapted mentally, even when looking at different cuisines to try and get a better balance.
Good tips. All right, nearly there. Our final topic. Artificial food dyes. There's talk of banning them.
Yes, it's a hot topic. There are ongoing concerns about artificial dyes.
What are the main worries?
Potential links to hyperactivity in some children is a big one that's been studied for years. And then there are questions about potential carcinogenic effects with long-term exposure to certain dyes, like Allura Red AC, also known as Red 40.
But is there anything positive happening, like ways to clean them up if they get into the environment?
Actually, yes. There's some cool research into using nanoparticle technology to essentially filter out or remove toxic dyes from water. So potential solutions for the environmental side.
And this links back to the general concerns about synthetic ingredients we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It's part of that broader conversation about the potential health effects of highly processed synthetic components in our food supply.
Are there tools to help people make healthier choices, avoiding this stuff?
There are efforts underway. Things like the Market to Dish framework were mentioned, aiming to give people health-aware food recommendations, potentially factoring in things like dyes.
Who decides if these dyes are safe right now?
Regulatory agencies like the FDA in the US and EFSA in Europe, they review the evidence and set acceptable daily intake levels, though those assessments are sometimes debated.
And if someone like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. actually proposed a ban, what would happen?
Well, it would be a huge shift for the food industry. They'd likely have to rely much more heavily on natural colorants from things like beets, turmeric, spirulina, which can sometimes be trickier to work with or more expensive.
And technology might help with analyzing food better in the future.
Yeah, things like zero-shot food detection were mentioned. It's part of food computing using AI to potentially get much more detailed nutritional info about meals just from, say, a picture. Pretty advanced stuff.
Wow, okay. So we've covered a ton of ground, from food craft to finance to fad diets.
It's quite the mix, but looking back, you can really see some common threads, can't you?
Definitely. Like how all these different consumer choices, what we eat, what we put on our skin, even how we bank, are all kind of connected to our overall well-being, our desire for health or satisfaction, or maybe just following a trend.
Exactly. It's all part of this complex web of consumer life. And another big theme is how technology and regulations are constantly reshaping everything.
Yeah, digital tools, changing healthcare, AI helping with food choices, banking rules adapting, potential bans on ingredients, recycling laws. It's this constant interplay between innovation, oversight, and how it impacts us.
And layered over all of that is this noticeable shift, or at least a growing conversation around sustainability and health consciousness.
Right. More interest in natural skincare, plant-based eating, recycling, more scrutiny of additives. Are people really changing or just talking about it more?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Is it deep change or just surface level? Probably a bit of both, depending on the person and the issue.
So for everyone listening, hopefully this deep dive sparked some thoughts about your own choices. Does learning about Shokunin make you appreciate quality differently?
Are you maybe looking a bit closer at ingredient lists now on food or cosmetics?
Could you see yourself trying meatless Mondays or just adding more plants overall?
How might those kind of abstract banking rule changes actually touch your financial lives, even indirectly?
Are you going to check if your furry friend needs a bit more playtime or slightly smaller meals?
Will you think twice about portion sizes next time you order in, or maybe try to use one less plastic bag?
Lots to chew on, definitely.
These are the kinds of questions that help us connect this broader information back to our own lives.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this exploration today. We really hope diving into all these different areas has been interesting and maybe even useful for you.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. It's all about staying curious in this fast-moving world.
Absolutely. And maybe one last thing to ponder as we wrap up. In a world just saturated with information, with options coming at us constantly, how do we actually cultivate a truly mindful way of cuisine? One that genuinely benefits us, but also looks out for the health of the planet and the wider community.